it's an honor to interview, and it will be a guiding light for aspiring students. And I would like to introduce you first of all. So Dr. Santosh, we have here with us Dr. Santosh Kumar, who is the Dean, School of Liberal Arts and Management Studies, PP Sapni University, Surat, and Professor of Politics, Public Poetry, Policy and Administration. He has over 25 years of educational experience across various schools and colleges and universities like Flame University, Pune School of Liberal Studies, PTPU Gandhinagar, and the School of Rural Development, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and post-experience and post-graduate program of development sector at EDI Ahmedabad. He is an awardee of. He was awarded a doctorate in politics from Jawaharlal National University, Nehru University, New Delhi, and University of Glasgow, UK. He is an awardee of UGC, JRF, and SRF. He visited Irish Department of Politics, University of Glasgow, and on Commonwealth Fellowship. So, thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
So, sir, my first question would be, how has COVID impacted the education industry? Share your thoughts on it. What differences do you observe in the education industry in the pre and post-COVID era?
I believe COVID has impacted not only education industry, education sector. I would like to look at it as a sector because this is one of the various sectors which is connected to so many other sectors also. So education sector itself was badly hit because in Indian context, as it is, we do not ascribe too much of significance to education. But then in the real time situation, I think education sector was very badly hit. There was some data which was available to us from the Surat city and from other cities, particularly those cities where the mainstay of the people's livelihood was business, a different kind of business. So when COVID in fact impacted the business itself, we had to see the result of this particular adverse impact on the education sector also. So one of the reports in Times of India, Surat, said that 46% of the students are less into the higher educational institutions, which was kind of telltale kind of situation where you do not see the students actually in a position to pay fees and be part of the online, offline kind of courses. So they prefer to actually sit at home, do some kind of online courses from Coursera or Udemy and those kind of things, but they were not in the formal educational institutions anytime, which was significant impact because there are many institutions which are on the fee model basis. So these institutions were impacted. The teachers had to struggle because the students were not in the classroom. So it was an impact not of one kind but of multiple kinds. You see, several levels and several hierarchies of impacts could be seen. So this is very important that and this was all happening because in the entire supply chain something else was also getting impacted.
Yes.
And that impact was impacting education. And because education was getting impacted, it was again impacting the entire social fabric. So now that we have started opening up the campus and offline classes in some way have started, I can see that happiness on the face of the students and the parents that finally they are coming back to the education institution. You see, so this is very important. So pre-COVID, of course, it was something which was very important for us. So what happened during the COVID times? 2-3 things were seen from the teacher's perspective. We saw that we had to be innovative in the methods of teaching itself. So the entire philosophy of, transferring this knowledge, where lots of technological infusion was also taking place, was seen, and it had to be adopted by the teachers. The students also had to gear themselves up because they had to learn the whole thing in a different way. So all those papers which were number-oriented papers, mathematical papers, engineering, statistics, science, and all those kind of things, this had to be taught in the most innovative manner, using the computer as a screen and interface, and the students had to learn.
Yes.
So post-COVID, which we are, almost calling new normal or whatever you want to call it, yes. We are actually evolving ourselves day by day. Every day we are trying to innovate, we are trying to find out new areas, and we are trying to basically be more creative. Because in the classroom, you know that you have either the blackboard or the whiteboard, and best possible situation is PPT. But here, in the post-COVID situation, you are using so many things in a hybrid mode, right?
Yes.
In the classroom itself, you are not only using PPT, but you are also using many other things, right? And since everybody is not in the classroom, so you are also again going from the online mode to offline, shifting back to online. Teachers are, and then many institutions who have this visiting faculty model also going on. So some of the papers are to be taught by the visiting faculty. Yes. So you see that 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock is in the offline mode, but 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock is in the online mode, right?
Yes, sir.
So many things are happening, and we are adjusting with each and everything. So this is so, as we say, man has to adapt and adapt to the changing situations. This is something that we are experiencing at this point in time.
Yes, sir. So adding on,
so this is PPSU has also done this.
Yes.
So, sorry.
Based on your answer, I want to add a question to that. Like, it created a shift from COVID pandemic, created a shift from offline mode to online mode in the education industry. So what challenges did you face during this transition? Because it was very in a fast pace. And was the infrastructure readily available when you needed it? And how did you manage that challenge of moving from offline mode to online mode?
The first thing was awareness of the technology itself.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So within 24 to 36 hours, at best 48 hours, we had to update ourselves to the knowledge system of online teaching, you see. And then since we were not prepared, so issue was bandwidth was there. We are located in urban center, right? So bandwidth was there. But I'm thinking about the students who are located in semi-urban or rural spaces.
Yes, sir.
They actually had the worst of the entire experience because their bandwidth was not available to them. Our technologies, we were trying to acquire new, we were trying to negotiate with many service providers, we were trying to install everything on our laptops and those kind of things. So whichever method works best, we were trying to do that, right? So technology-wise, the knowledge was available, but since we had not used any of it, so initial 1 week was actually a challenge. But then we knew that we are not going to be compromising on the teaching part. So come what may, we are definitely going to teach the student. That was our commitment, right? And it was almost halfway through that particular semester that time, last year around this time. Yes. And we couldn't have left our students in the middle of nowhere, you see. So we had to adopt. We had to adapt, we had to understand the technology, start using it. We committed mistakes, learned from the mistakes, but we still continued with our journey of technology. It was available. The question of supporting the technology but in terms of the bandwidth and other minor issues, but we were able to resolve that. That is for sure. So we were doing that. And one thing is very sure, that not for a day also we missed our classes. That's the best possible thing. That so while many other institutions were still struggling to look at the timetable and this and that, we saw to it, and particularly in my School of Liberal Arts and Management Studies, we would have virtual meeting with my colleagues, all of us were located in different directions. Yes. We would have virtual meeting. We decided that we are not going to change the timetable. So on that particular timetable, we converted the timetable itself into virtual classrooms, right? So that way there was a continuity which was maintained, and we would have our meeting with the provost and everybody, and then we just learned it, as simple as that. So now that when I look back 1 year back, whatever happened, it looks like a kind of a massive challenge that was coming our way, but we were able to overcome it.
Yes.
And now that we have done it for 1 year, I think we have become experts in doing that.
Glad to hear that, sir. Glad to hear.
Yeah.
My next question would be, being the dean at Institute of School of Liberal Arts and Management Studies, so you are at a leadership position in the PP Savani University. What is your philosophy of leadership and how would you describe your leadership style?
And you want me to answer that in 4 minutes time, right? Well, you see, I believe it has to be first among equals. Age differentiation and experiences and educational experiences, these are factual things. But whoever becomes part of your team, they all are equal people because that is why they are part of your team, right? So as a leader, I think I don't count myself as a dean. I'm first among equals. So the assistant professor in my team is equal to me. It's just a matter of time that because I have become senior, I'm sitting on this side of the table. So being democratic, taking everybody together and taking everybody's consent in seeking arriving at a decision is very important. So even if I have to stand at the back of everybody, it's fine with me because ultimately at the end of the day, as a team, we are trying to achieve something. So whoever takes the decision or whoever is instrumental in arriving at a particular decision, I think I would just facilitate that decision, which is very important for all of us. And to arrive, if we need to go to the discussion mode, it can go on endlessly, but we, at the end of the day, whether I like that decision or not, but as a team leader, I must abide by that decision because it has been taken by the team. So this is how I think I would like to look at my role as a dean at this point in time. And this is how we have been able to survive the difficult times of COVID, right? Because I do not think that my experiences vis-a-vis my colleagues is so profound that I can trust my decisions on them. It's very important that I must look at their strengths and their perception and their way of looking at the world. And at the end of the day, Vishwas, we all are teachers, right? So teaching, learning is a continuous process in our lives.
Yes.
So whether I'm a dean or a professor, I'm a teacher and a learner, and all of us are like that. So as long as this particular thing continues, each one of us is leader, and I'm at this point in time the leader. Yes.
Yes, sir. So my next question would be, when you first came to this institute, you would have had a certain vision for this institute. And how far along have you implemented that vision for this institute? And has the vision evolved over time?
This is 25th year of my teaching career.
Yes.
Out of which some 5 years have been in the various international organizations like World Bank, UNDP, ADB, etc., etc. And my teaching journey itself started a very good institution. You said in your introduction of me, and thank you for doing that. You see, my career has taught me one thing, that if the teaching is not in sync with the times, if it is not futuristic, right, it's not going to do any kind of good to your students, because the times are very uncertain, the times are very volatile, the times are very, very complex, and these three factors make your entire thing very, very uncertain, right? So if one has to borrow from the American Army's terminologies, I am pretty confident that all of us agree that we are living in the VUCA times, VUCA. And because this is VUCA time, American Army used it for a different reason, but I see that the reality of the day is actually VUCA. And in certain situations like the present times, and COVID has proved that this is very uncertain and complex in everything, right? In this kind of situations, if you have to give a different vision to your education system, then there has to be a sharp break from whatever was happening all this while, right? New education policy and COVID, they both actually have come as a kind of blessing at this point in time. And since I was one of the persons associated with drafting the new education policy in my own small and humble manner, I knew that this is how the break from the past and being futuristic is going to be the order of the day. So my vision for School of Liberal Arts and Management Studies at all the 3 levels of education, whether this was undergraduation or post-graduation, doctorate, of course, PhD is well defined, but UG and PG had to be in a very, very different format. I call it liberal studies and pedagogy, where facilitation of the learning for the student has to be there. So I came to this institution almost 1.5 years back, as a dean, with this vision that I'm going to be launching something which is going to be extremely useful for the students for their second and third job. This is something which I'm very clear, because first job is something that they will get. Now, when I say second and third job, what I mean to say is that what kind of education do I give to them, or what kind of facilitation of learning should I create so that the same thing is relevant to them when they are ready for their second and third job. Yes. It should not be a short-term kind of relationship. This learning and teaching has to be so well designed that it is relevant to them even for future. And this is all because the times are very uncertain. So in this situation, then what will happen? You cannot simply rely on the knowledge of one particular specialization. You have to create a body of knowledge which is interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, well infusion of technology in the social science and humanities, and vice versa. And second thing, in my scheme of things, and that is actually part of my vision, I'm looking at the skill development courses in a very, very systematic manner. And when I say skill development courses, I talk about 2 kinds of skill. One is the knowledge-based skill, and the second is lifestyle and employability-based skills courses. So knowledge-based is something that where you should read competently, you should analyze, you should critically use your knowledge, etc., etc. But then employability and life skill is how do you make your presence felt in the society? That is something which is very important. So we have embedded the knowledge, skill, and aptitude in our curriculum. And this is liberal studies pedagogy, where we are looking at foundation courses, vertical specialization, skill-based courses, and most importantly, we are looking at the specialization courses within the majors. We know that 2022 onwards, when the new education policy is going to be unveiled by our Honorable Prime Minister, we are going to be seeing at 4 years of undergraduation with 1 year of master, which is going to be very, very specialized if the students want to get into that. Otherwise, the BA honors student should be so competent to straightway go to the PhD program, which means your 4th year of undergraduate actually has to create the students who are almost at par with the master's student, right? Yes, sir. How do you create that? So I'm very happy to announce that the SLM offers the courses, School of Liberal Studies and Management Studies, offers the courses which are already in compliance with the new education policy requirements, right? Almost all the majors are actually doing that. And this is nothing but I'm trying to create my, convert my vision into reality. Yes. Which is I'm seeing happening practically. Now the challenge was, as soon as this thing was ready, I was faced with a situation of COVID. Yes. You understand? Yes. So not much could have been achieved, could be achieved, but I'm sure this year onwards, because my methods are also finer now, I know that what exactly COVID has created the VUCA. So my methods and my thoughts are much more finer and much more refreshed. I'm going to be, me and my team is going to be actually looking to it that the philosophy and vision of SLM is actually converted into practice. So yes.
Based on your answer itself, I guess you have mostly answered my next question. Like, we generally see that there's a skill mismatch between graduating students and the working force which the industry expects. So you have answered that question, but I would like some more information on that, like any example of such courses which you have inculcated in your curriculum, which have helped graduating students match the requirements, match the expectations of the industry workforce.
You say for different kind of courses, the definition of industry would be different, right? I come from the background of public policy. So for me, the meaning of industry would be very different. Somebody who is graduating in sociology, for him, the industry would be very different, right? Somebody who is doing his major in English literature or language, the meaning of industry would be very different. My idea of infusing the new age skill courses is something which means that the students must be able to reflect critically on the environment, ecosystem, in which he is trying to basically look at his specialization of major or any specialization. Now in BBA program, we have two super specializations. One is family business, the other one is entrepreneurship. And you know that Government of India's entire philosophy, professional philosophy is geared towards this. So you have Startup India, Stand Up India, this, that, thousands of things are happening. Now everything is happening. How are my students going to be different from the crowd? That is very important. So you need to infuse those kind of capacities of thinking. Now that comes with when you are actually dividing your courses between 40 to 60 ratio, where 40% is classroom and 60% is experiential learning. And this is something that we have actually brought down to when we were designing the curriculum itself. What is industry for a particular context? We are actually co-teaching the entire things. We are co-teaching the papers, different kind of papers. Now the papers also have been divided in such manner that some papers will have more theory and less experiential opportunity, but some papers are actually 80% experiential and only 20% classroom teaching. And third category of paper is 100% that you have to go out in the context and then understand it yourself. So do it yourself. At the same time, certain skills have been, as a method of pedagogy is being built into the students. For example, how do you arrive at a decision? What decision making capacities, for example. Now people do not even know what is decision, right? And how do you identify the problem? And this is all happening because 90% of the time we mistake the symptoms for the problems. So how do you go within the layers of what you see around you, and how do you actually pinpoint what is the problem? Because in life or in research, if the problems are identified clearly, then the rest is only the problem of solving it, you see. Right? So these kind of skills are very important, which have been embedded in a particular program, in a particular course, in a particular module, or otherwise also we keep on inviting people from the industry. Again, industry being different for different sets of people, to talk to the students about what is relevant in the field right now. So one is following case study method, which is coming to us as a kind of a legacy. But we are in a process of creating our own cases by understanding what is happening in the ecosystem. So for the management programs, we have created 2 or 3 fora. One of the very significant forum is SETU, 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 which means the bridge. So it's a metaphor for connecting the academia with the industry. SETU, the Connect program, is a weekly industry connect program for our students, and it is mandatory for the students as well as the faculty to attend those kind of events. So we have already had some 6-7 very illustrious guests at very serious senior levels of their positioning in different kind of industries, telling the students what is it that the industry wants. So while you are doing these kind of courses, fine, but what is it that we are looking at? We are looking at you as our future employees, so that you start jumping on the first day in the organization. Don't even wait for the training and orientation and those kind of things to happen. You are just there to perform the job. Fine. You need to be skilled enough. You need to be experienced enough at your level in the field. And this is something that we are providing. So this is the skill component that we are trying to embed with our curriculum.
So, sir, my next question is for the aspiring students who wish to join your SLM PP Savni University. What is the core strengths of your institute as compared to other institutes in this domain?
I think I'm not talking about the other institutions per se.
Yes.
But I think we have taken an edge, or we have taken a step ahead as compared to many institutions. I'm not saying all of them, because there are many other better institutions than us. But what we have done is that we have already first thing designed the courses from a very, very futuristic perspective. The courses have been, as I said, designed in such a manner that the experiential learning opportunities are built into the whole thing, built into the entire curriculum and way of teaching. Third thing is that we are already in the 4-year format, 4-year plus 1-year format. Now, whether we call it integrated master's program or integrated MBA is just a matter of nomenclature. But the structure has been designed in such a manner that if the students come to this course, they'll not find it a challenging opportunity at all, because it has been built like that. So from the foundation to most specialization, and this we could consider as USP of this model that we are facilitating at SLM. So what is happening is that we are creating a foundation of the integrated nature of all the subjects and all, on the basis of which then the students select their vertical specialization. Within the vertical specialization, there are two types of it. One is the core of the specialization. The other is super specialization that has been brought into. For example, I'll give you I'll just try to explain it by giving an example of economics major that we are having here. So we are offering major of 18 papers, which is very massive as it is, very top heavy it seems, but it's very practical. So out of the 18 papers, we are talking about the core, the introduction to the specialization, and the third component of 6 papers will be super specialization. So while doing the specialization, or let's say BA honors in economics, the student will end up doing one of the 3 specializations. He could specialize in development economics, or environmental economics, or behavioral economics at the undergraduate level. Now, this is something which I do not see anywhere happening. And since I have been myself exposed to the liberal education format in different institutions of the country, I know for sure that this is something which is a USP for us. And this is also with an idea, because we want to create the students at the UG level almost, as I said earlier, at par with the master's program. These are the courses which are taught at the master's program. So 6 papers in environmental economics, cross-listed with public policy. You understand? So 40% of the courses at the specialization level will be cross-listed. And then you have your minor courses embedded along with the major program. So you have major cross-listing with other disciplines and a minor to supplement your major. Now, point is, along with all these things, then you also have experiential learning. You have annual visits to the various contexts, what we called Shodh, the field work. So many things are happening. And everything is supplementing and complementing the learning process in a very unique manner. So I think this is the USP. And with this USP, I think the students should explore this institution when they are in the process of designing or deciding their future institution.
Yes.
And to take care of all these things, our team is full of the best possible brains that we have. So people with their specialization, who are willing to learn, who are willing to experiment, who are willing to innovate in their methods are there. So it's not the question of my vision, it's the question of the collective vision that SLM is trying to pursue. Yes. This is what it is. Yes. And hence students should come to this institute.
Yes, sir, definitely. I also wish the same. So adding on to that, like in every institute in our educational ecosystem in India, we find that there is an inherent gap between the students and the professors of an institute, which results in less transparency, and the students do not reach out to the professors for guidance. Even if it's a very genuine problem for them, they inhibit from asking their professors for a genuine problem also. So what can be done to reduce this gap? And have you taken any initiative in their institutes for the same?
Vishwas, see, if the students are not there, then why I'm sitting on this chair? That's the whole question, right? And since I'm there, the students have to be there. So this is the relationship between me and my students. And since we both are made for each other, the teachers and the students are made for each other, and one without the other has no relevance of their existence. Obviously, there cannot be lack of transparency between the two very significant parts of this relationship. And this is a beautiful relationship. You see, as a teacher, my philosophy in last 2.5 decades of my experience has been that if I am able to change the thinking of even 5 students in my life, I think my life as a teacher is done. And to do that, if I hold myself away from the students, then this is not a good idea. So I keep encouraging my faculty colleagues, my team, to always accept the students for whatever problems that we have. You see, as a teacher, we need to learn from the students. It's a gap of 2.5 generations between me and my students, right? And they are much ahead of me when it comes to looking at the world. So it's very important that I keep learning and keep reinventing myself with the help of my students, which is very important. And the students must be encouraged to learn from me. So one of the things which I always tell my students that, look, my hands and my hands are spread towards you. Now it's your job to pull yourself and hold my hand if you want to come up. So in this entire process of influencing each other, how can we have lack of transparency? That is very important. This is something that I have adopted as a philosophy in my life, and I try to tell all my colleagues that this is how we have to help the students. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. And since, again, continuing with the same thing, this could be USP, or this could be USP of many institutions, that if we are not connected with the students will have no faith in the academic institution. And this is not a temporary relationship that they have paid the fees, they were here for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years for PhD or whatever. It's a life-defining experience for this particular phase of life, right? So as I am connected to my institutions, Delhi University or JNU or the University of Glasgow, I'm also connected to all those institutions internationally where I had an opportunity to teach. So, I still try to maintain my relationship with my students in Kathmandu or Bangladesh or anywhere, and in India also. Because this is not something which is going to be a temporary thing. They have influenced me, I have influenced them. And this is not possible if this continuous exchange of ideas is taking shape. And I'm very happy that my colleagues also do that. Yes. So this is good enough for us. Yes.
So my next question is it is always said that very few entrepreneurs coming out of Indian educational system. So what could be the reason behind this? And are there any initiatives taken by your institute to facilitate students with entrepreneurial ambitions?
That's a little policy related question also, but I believe in last 5-6 years of time, we have seen many good policies by Government of India has been announced. I just mentioned a few.
Yes.
But before that, we already have seen that there's an evolution of the industry policy which gave way to the micro and small and medium enterprises. Before that, it was small scale industries. So at some point of time, it was all happening. I believe this was more to do with the financial institutions who also had to repose their faith in the students and their knowledge system, right? So this was not happening. But I believe now, with the advent of the policies like Atal Atal Community Innovation Center, or Atal Innovation Mission, or SSIP like policies where the education institutions are the major stakeholders, these kind of things are happening, right? And this is happening right at the community level. Community, I mean external community, external to the context of the universities, where the students can go and actually experiment and come back and say, like, look, this is what I want to do. And then you have created spatial structures, and PPSU also has created spatial structures to look at the SSIP related initiatives, to look at the Atal innovation related ideas. We also are one of the institutions where ACIC, was decided in our favor. So since ACIC itself is on a hold right now, so official declaration cannot be made, but we might be getting ACIC also. The point is and then each and every school of this university has to depute at least 2 faculty members from their team who will be represented at the university level, and they will take care of the university innovation and entrepreneurship creation needs. And we have lectures being delivered for the students. Students get into the competition, they showcase their work, so on and so forth. So I believe SLM as a component and constituent of PPSU, and PPSU as the mega body, which is connected to the ecosystem outside the university, like industrial houses are there, so many NGOs are there, so many civil society organizations are there, and they also, and financial institutions for that matter. So there is not a single component which has to be missed out. So I believe whatever has happened all this while, this is fine, but what is going to happen is much more promising for us. So we have the structures in place, we have the right kind of people in place. Our training and placement cell is working with the SSIP and all those kind of things. And it's a very, unfortunately, in the meanwhile, this 11 months have been wasted completely. But even in those times, we were trying to encourage and engage with the students, so that sitting at home itself, if they could do something. And then, I must inform you, and this gives me immense pleasure, that our students have been able to create so many variants of the, what is this called? Hand sanitizer. Our students have created nanotechnology based mask, which is actually in great demand in the city of Surat and many places. Students are getting order, you see. This is all innovation. This is all entrepreneurial ventures that we have. And not only this, many more. It's possible that at this point in time, I may not be able to tell you all, yes, but everything is happening. Yes. So I believe in next 5 years' time, we should be in a position to create a fabulous, good number of entrepreneurs who are coming out of this university. So one is the university level thing. And in our school, where I'm sitting right now, School of Liberal Arts and Management Studies, the BBA program itself offers specialization in entrepreneurship, which is a super specialization. Yes. So right from the first semester till the 8th semester, they will be reading basic to most advanced courses globally in entrepreneurship. So the knowledge, the infrastructure, everything is there. So I think this will happen. And many more institutions are also doing that. Yes. And we will also be doing the same kind of thing. So no problems with that, please. Yeah.
Glad to hear that students are encouraged for fulfilling their entrepreneurial ambitions in your institute.
Yeah, big time. Yes.
But my last question would be, we generally see that students get confused while opting for higher education, placements, or becoming an entrepreneur. They generally sacrifice their passion, which results in loss of creativity and productivity for them. So, share your thoughts on it and what should be the primary factors for a student while deciding upon choosing his or her career path. What will be your advice to aspiring students?
I think this is in continuation to the discussion we were just having on the opportunities. Point is, and this is where the new education policy and and the philosophy of School of Liberal Arts becomes very important, and they both are in synchronization with each other. The basic purpose of education is basically not to teach. This is only a small component of this relationship, right? Because you do not know that, so I am giving you that information. So information sharing could be one very small component. What is very important is that I put you in touch with your own self. You understand? Now, if I'm putting you in touch with yourself and I'm explaining to you the potentials and the challenges from your perspective in front of you, what is it that you could do and what is it that you could do with more caution, and that is it, and what is it that you should be waiting for a while. If I'm able to, through several courses, explain to you these three things, then I'm actually facilitating your thought processes, isn't it? I'm facilitating your critical part of the thinking, where you are able to take decision, and in that decision making, if a teacher like me or any of my colleagues at the school level is going to be beneficial, this is what education has to be. So conventionally, the focus of education was to give you knowledge, right? I believe my philosophy is different. We feel that we should facilitate transfer of knowledge because that they don't have that, right? If they must learn statistics, then they must learn statistics. But learning statistics is more important. I mean, what is more important than learning statistics is application of statistics. You understand? So I'm teaching economics or I teach public policy, but it's not from the theoretical perspective. It's from the perspective of how it is going to be relevant to them. Now, when you do these kind of things, obviously you are creating different sets of students. Some of them would want to come and sit on my chair as future deans, or they would want to get into academics. It's their call, finally. Some of them would want to get into services. Many of my students have cleared civil service examinations and they are preparing for it. And I must facilitate that part of their craving for the future. Some of them want to get into decent services or they want to be a kind of job seeker. But many of them would want to start something on their own. Point is, if you do not facilitate what they wish to learn, how will you create this? Something which was seriously missing in majority of the academic institutions in our country, unfortunately. So IIT systems, IIM systems, they were a league apart, right? I mean, they're the entire focus, and also because they were, they were professional courses. But what happens to the semi-professional courses like policy studies or economics or sociology? They're not. We created them as a kind of academic programs, right? But how do you create the professional opportunities out of these kind of courses? So I'm very happy that the English major that we have designed at PPSU will also produce the equally competent people who could start their own ventures. Now that sounds very, very vague at this point in time, but why not? If my students can learn economics and English language as a major minor combination, and if they want to become bloggers, it is their entrepreneurial venture, isn't it? Yes. So you have to basically expand the entire horizon of what professional life you would want to live. It's redefining the professional word itself. So the situation is, Vishwasji, very going to be whatever you touch becomes the profession. Got it? So I'm basically breaking myself from the past of looking at the word profession from a very conventional sense. You see, I'm trying to redefine the word profession itself. And competent professionals, not because you just wanted to do it, you do it. You do it with equal proficiency.
Yes.
This is something that we believe, and this is my vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this interview. That sums up all my questions. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to interview you. This will be a great learning for aspiring students and for us also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vishwasji, and thank you for this opportunity to associate myself with College Dunia, and for asking me these very pertinent questions. Particularly, I have been speaking about these issues at various fora, but I think this particular session that I had with you, I hope that it is going to help the students if they want to seek their calling, and I just hope that many of the people who look at this particular session, they can come here and interact with us at least. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.